G'day superstars, welcome to Mr. Jorgen's classroom, and today we're going to be looking at the Secret River again, looking at conflict. So let's just redefine conflict so we're on the same page. The literary purpose of conflict is to create tension in the story, making readers more interested by leaving them uncertain which of the characters or forces will prevail. So a force, we can think of the environment, we could think of supernatural things. It is often used to reveal a deeper meaning in a narrative while highlighting characters' motivations, values, and weaknesses. So, one of the key things we're looking for in your exam essays is your understanding of values, attitudes, and beliefs, as you will know. So, let's have a look at two different types of conflict that are present in the Secret River. We're going to look at a racial conflict, and we're going to look at human versus nature. So, first of all, let's look at racial conflict. So, this is conflict between two races in the novel, the English settlers and the Aboriginal peoples of the Hawkesbury River. And I think it's really crucial for us to remember that race is a construct of society. So, it's based on one's attitudes, values, and beliefs. And that's the idea of race, that people look at others and they see a race purely based on their background and their upbringing. So, because we are all one race, right? So, therefore, it's reflective of historical perspectives and even contemporary conflicts in our society, as we're seeing currently in America and all over the world. The origin of this conflict in the novel comes from land ownership and whose right it is to inhabit the land. So, the Aboriginal peoples being there first, cultivating the land, etc., versus the colonial ideals of the British. Conflict is expressed both physically and verbally. We'll be looking at these two quotes in more detail. So, first of all, let's talk about the first one. This happens in the prologue of Strangers. And we're reading now. So, be off, the man was shouting. Be off. It was his own tone exactly, his own meaning, William Thornhill. This was a kind of madness, as if a fog were to bark in English, a dog to bark in English. So what this reveals to us are William Thornhill's core beliefs about other people, or people who look different. So the perspective of the novel isn't first person, but most of the time we're seeing it from William Thornhill's point of view. So Grenville is using this idea of as if a dog were to bark in English as a way of showing that William Thornhill's beliefs about people who look different to him, such as the Aboriginal people, are that of a dehumanizing perspective. He doesn't see them as equal to himself. Even though the man is speaking to him in his own tone, he still sees this man as something less than human. Okay, so this is revealing to us, this conflict, this verbal conflict, is revealing to us themes of colonial aspects and themes of, how the Aboriginal people were treated. This is moving on to our next quote. The black natives of the colony have manifested a strong and sanguinary spirit of animosity and hostility towards the British inhabitants. So this is a quote that comes from a note from the governor, and all of the residents of the Hawkesbury River are reading this. And what this communicates to us is a number of things that are a little bit deeper into the theme of colonialism. So let's read this carefully again. The black natives of the colony. So that word choice and that way of writing from the governor's perspective positions the Aboriginal people to be a part of the colony. So it's absorbing them into the colony. And they have manifested a strong and sanguinary, meaning bloodthirsty, spirit of animosity and hostility towards the British inhabitants. So by calling the British people inhabitants, it almost gives them a place and a belonging. So this racial conflict is revealing attitudes towards colonialism. It's revealing values that the British people held towards the natives. They're seeing them as a part of the colony. They're seeing what they're doing as absorbing the place that they're trying to colonize. Okay. Moving on to our next conflict, human versus nature. So this conflict is driven by one's approach, place, or relationship with nature, meaning how they engage with nature, where they're positioned within nature, and also their relationship, meaning it could be how they work with nature for their job, etc. Nature responds in a multitude of ways for the people that have this conflict. For some, it does not bend to their will, so they're not able to change nature, or they try to nature, but nature does not respond. For others, nature is alive. It almost seems to strike back at them. And we see this especially in the chapter of Strangers, where Thornhill seems so confronted by the space, by the darkness and sprawl of nature. Okay? So, first of all, we're going to talk about the idea of ownership through these quotes and how that creates a conflict of land. So, he loves the thing a fence did to a place. The tidy square of ground inside the fence had a different look from the ground outside it. A fence told a man how far he had travelled, and beyond the last length of fence he could see where he might go next. And this is demonstrating to us Thornhill's relationship with the space in his fence. That's his. He owns that plot of land. And the reference to a tidy square of ground, it's kept to a specific criteria of the person. A fence told a man how far he had traveled. So it's a dominance. It's a sense of dominance to have this fence up of nature. And beyond the last length of fence, he could see where he might go next. Moving on to the next quote, which comes after this idea of a fence. So there was this about it, though no matter how much a man did in this place, the everlasting forest could not be got rid of. And this is showing that, yes, even though the settlers are trying to take over this land, there is still this primal force of nature, of forest, of bushland that cannot be tamed. That for some power beyond one's own, they cannot dominate it. So even though Thornhill thinks, beyond my fence, I can see where I'm going next, there's still this forest that stretches on forever. And this is, I guess, showing how potent nature is in Australia and how strong it is. The harshness of the climate, the sprawl that we have that seems to stretch on forever. This shows that it's insurmountable for some. However, it also shows the belief that man can attempt to dominate it, that man can attempt to stretch their legs and see how much they can take. And they symbolize that through a fence. Now, this is a little bit different. So yes, we've looked at conflict, but conflict also resolves. And at the different times in the novel it resolves can tell us something. So this is where Thornhill sees his place, his point, the place he will then inhabit for most of the novel. A chaos opened up inside of him, a confusion of wanting. No one had ever spoken to him of how a man might fall in love with a piece of ground. No one had ever spoken of how there could be this teasing sparkle and dance of light among the trees, this calm, clean space that invited feet to enter it. So we need to think, what does this reveal about William Thornhill? It's showing that he needs that ownership. He needs that place of belonging, because that's what he's searching for throughout a lot of his life. He's looking for his own space and place. And he's finally found that in Australia. He's finally found his place. And this is demonstrating to us, I suppose, his ignorance, because this quote that we read before about the fence and the dominance and the everlasting forest comes quite late in the novel. So we could talk about how this is the ignorance of the colonizers to think that they could tame it. It's commenting on the theme of home and of place and of how much one needs to have that. So this shows us that Thornhill, he really believes that he can take this land, but we know by the end of the novel that he can't. So those are our quote analyses. I hope this has been a helpful revision over conflict, and that you can get something out of this to take away into your exam. So ensure that you're considering how not just conflict occurs, but think about how it's revealing deeper meaning in a narrative. Relate your conflict back to themes. Think about how conflict is highlighting your characters or your chosen characters' motivations to do things, their values, their attitudes and beliefs, and even their character flaws if you're looking at your characters. Okay, thanks for tuning in.